Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this event co-hosted by Politecnico di Milano, Brunel University London, Southern Denmark University, and Wageningen University and Research on the question, what is the true meaning of circularity? Beverage packaging as a case study. I'm John Paul Judson, and it's an honor, but also an excitement to facilitate this discussion today. Now, the question we are facing has an almost Shakespearean ring to it. You know, what is the true meaning of circularity? And even before understanding the true meaning of circularity, it is clear that the concept has already entered the public debate and has imposed itself as a benchmark for decisions and actions, especially as a response to the littering of single-use plastics. But circularity itself is also hotly debated, and different pathways are being taken, different decisions are being made, various political visions are being set out, all of which are justified by the need to increase the circularity of products or materials. Of course, consumers play a role, but these big decisions are largely in the hands of policymakers and industry. And the question then becomes, what is guiding those decisions? And are these decisions leading us to a more sustainable outcome overall? Now, this event takes place more specifically as a follow-up to a paper published by 4 academics in May this year, Eleni Iacovidou, Cyprian Chimpan, Ulfard Toden van Velzen, and Lucia Rigamonti, who call for a meaningful, practical, and inclusive approach to circularity that does not lose track of the ultimate goal, which is sustainability. And at the same time, they propose a way to facilitate decision-making on the path towards more sustainable circularity in the market. And we'll be hearing more about that, their views in a second. But this event also comes at a time when important decisions are being taken on packaging policy, and the paper calls for an open dialogue with academia, industry, and policymakers on setting the right framework conditions to facilitate those decisions that lead to a more sustainable outcome. And that is why we will also get reactions from industry with Arnaud Mitelet from Source Alma, from policy with Davide Tonini from the European Commission's Joint Research Centre, and from academia with Monia Niero from the Santa Ana School of Advanced Studies. After that, we will be opening the floor to your participation, as this is an open discussion, an open dialogue, and we have a great mix of participants today with representatives from industry and academia in particular, but also participants joining us from 24 different countries, including non-EU countries. All of you have valuable insights to share, so please don't hesitate to join the discussion. A couple of housekeeping rules. You can do that by using the chat and the Q&A function, where you can both ask a question, but you can also start or join a discussion. I will be monitoring your questions and comments and raising them with speakers, but even better that you take the floor. If you want to take the floor, just click the raise your hand button, and we will then enable your microphone. And you're invited to enable your camera as well, so that you can really engage in the conversation. The meeting is recorded, so please be aware of that as well. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to get us started by introducing Eleni Iacovidou. She will be the first of the 4 academics to take us through the presentation of the academic paper and their views on what is the true meaning of circularity. Eleni is a senior lecturer in environmental management at Brunel University of London. So Eleni, please take us through.
Thank you very much. I have to say that it was and it is an immense pleasure to work with Jean-Paul, Cyprian, Ulford, and Lucia on this work. The aim of this work is really to rekindle, if you like, discussion on the true meaning of circularity and the way this can support strategic decision-making in policy and business spheres. I will personally delve into the true meaning of circularity, the notion, if you like, of circularity as a whole, and how this should be understood to create positive long-term impact and help us to achieve sustainability. Then you will hear from Cyprian, who will explain how we need to bring different parts of the system together to create an inclusive circularity, and then Ulfar will take you through the different types of circularity and introduce you into the circularity scorecard, which is a rapid assessment tool, if you like, of the potential circularity of resources that Lucia will then explain further using the PET beverage bottle as an example. So what is circularity? To me, circularity it means a lot of things, but I think nowadays circularity has become a contested idea. I think that it's an idea that is complex because the concept itself is complicated, and it has created ambiguity in the way the circularity is addressed. When I think of circularity, I think of it in the sense of creating systemic change, bringing growth, promoting efficiency, innovation, creating and sustaining natural wealth and promoting well-being. But this is not how circularity is being understood and implemented nowadays. Somehow we enter into a situation where circularity is focused on superficial effects and is short-sighted. So it's not really helping us understand how to promote circularity in the true sense, how to keep materials in use for as long as possible, to design out waste and eliminate pollution, and in that way allow nature to regenerate itself and replenish all of these resources that we rely on. So the question is, how can we promote circularity? How can we make it more meaningful in our system? And I think the answer lies on the fact that first we need to understand how the system works. We need to understand the processes involved in the system. And this needs to create an understanding of the value chain. We need to understand the flows of materials, components, and products in the system, the inputs and outputs in the different processes that are making the system. We also need to understand the values embedded in the system, economic values, environmental values, social values, because in this way, we may be able to understand how to keep the materials, components, and products in the system for longer, and also how we can promote circularity in the way these are managed. And the management it's a major component of the system. We have to also acknowledge that these systems are complex and they involve intricate value chains and stakeholders which come with different interests and views of how circularity should be promoted. And therefore, of course, we have to appreciate the fact that circularity is not just at the management stage of the value chain, it's not just up downstream, it also includes wasted resources and outputs upstream of the value chain. So how do we promote circularity in the upstream part is also an important aspect. So the next slide really shows my perspective on the circularity. This slide, yes, which shows that it's a bit of a circular process of looking at the value chain, where the management underlies all of the other steps, if you like, in the value chain, where we appreciate the cascading in the materials, components, and products properties. We understand how these are made, how they are designed, and therefore how they are exposed to the different conditions in which they are used, how they are handled by the end users and the consumers, and in which settings these are used, so that we can understand how these insights can help us to better promote circularity. So a meaningful circularity is really a circularity that promotes sustainability. So understanding how the inherent design and creative characteristics of materials, components, and products change whilst this flow on the value chain, these allow us then to go and assess and evaluate the negative and positive impacts. And we almost always have to keep in mind, how can we maximize the positive impacts we gain from the way we are managing our wasted resources. So we shouldn't focus on unrealistic perfect circles, but really understand what is the potential value that can be created by the circularity that we can introduce in the system, and which type of circularity. And you will hear more about the different types later on. So what I want to make a point about is that understanding that sustainability and circularity need to go hand in hand. And in order to do that, we need to promote integrated cross-value chain approaches where we bring the different elements together, elements and stakeholders and values, so that we can assess properly how we can manage and promote the circularity. So circularity is really a mission that needs a well-calculated plan that has to be executed to perfection, because this is the only way by which we can avoid embedding risks of cementing policy and infrastructures that create lock-in, and they prevent us from promoting sustainability through circularity. We need to understand which technologies can help us understand the circularity potential of the different materials, components, and products that are placed on the market and on the system, and how we can promote circularity at different parts of the value chain and different ways by which we can recover maximum value from them. And then we can also help to developing regions to keep at pace with circularity strategies that we put in place, and to retain simplicity and inclusivity to help all stakeholders understand the varying levels of circularity. So that's what we are going to discuss with this webinar, and we're going to do that using the plastic packaging and the PET beverage bottle specifically as an example of deliberating on the questions about inclusiveness and meaningful circularity, technologies and regional specificities, and simplistic approach to assessing the potential risk circularity. So I will now pass on the baton to Cyprian to guide you through the inclusivity in the circularity. Thank you very much.
I'll start by introducing myself. So my name is Cyprian Kumpan. I'm an associate professor and head of program for our Master of Environmental Engineering at the University of Southern Denmark, specifically part of a research group called SDU Lifecycle Engineering. So we're here today to try to answer what is the true meaning of circularity. In my opinion, it's something that is not easy to answer, and we don't really expect that we will get all the aspects out today. But my co-authors and I, nevertheless, have put together in this paper a number of the different dimensions that are really important in the definition of circularity. Specifically, that circularity should be meaningful in its effects and its objectives. It should be inclusive in scope, and it should be practical in terms of applications and in terms of measurement. In the next couple of slides, I will specifically focus on the second aspect in that, and that is inclusiveness. Specifically, to achieve large-scale circularity, there are at least three dimensions we have to consider, and that is, first, we need to better include developing regions, both in research, but also in policy and in business practices. That means considering the geographical and socioeconomic context and supply chains. Second, we need policy that has a level of flexibility in terms of our continuously expanding portfolio of technical approaches to deliver circularity. And finally, or third, we need to better integrate socioeconomic perspectives, consumer user behavior, and markets within our definition of circularity. Now I'll start with the first one, which is quite obvious. If we look at such a picture like here, many of you have seen similar ones or exactly this one. We have enormous amounts of plastics generated as waste around the globe. And of course, large amounts of that are in regions which are middle to low income. And much of this waste is also managed improperly, ending up polluting the environment. And in combination with the fact that in the future, we expect that most of the consumption of plastics will also happen in the same regions, we have a real problem. In Europe, we have almost a stable consumption of plastics. Therefore, we need to actually focus much more on what happens outside Europe. And somehow we have to include that in policies in Europe. All right, so then I'll try to show this nice figure I have made here with the help of a very nice and very recent new paper by Kim Ragaert et al. On clarifying European terminology in plastic recycling. So this figure shows an overview of the many different types of approaches we can apply to from a technical perspective to plastic circularity. If we have the horizontal processes as the normal linear flow, then we can keep value at the level of product through reuse or remanufacture. We have mechanical recycling. We have chemical recycling, and we have even gasification and waste incineration with carbon capture and utilization, the last of which can produce different feedstocks that can be fed back into the plastics value chain. And lastly, we need also demand reduction, and here meaningful demand reduction, not by substitution to other materials, in my opinion. Besides this, all of these approaches require many different additional aspects to be settled. For instance, we need design for circularity for many of the approaches which are closer to the product. We need multi-use systems to exist. We don't really have them today. We need behavior interventions, even if we talk about increasing collection, and we need to mitigate rebound effects. And rebound effects can be even by all the new infrastructure that we want to build. That investment creates rebound by itself as well. On the higher levels, if we talk about gasification, carbon capture and utilization, we need large-scale renewable energy transition. And we need also, in terms of policy, some kind of framework to track carbon circularity, in addition to just to materials. And this is my last slide. I want to conclude with a number of kind of key takeaway messages from these three different dimensions here. And that is, from a policy perspective, we need much more attention to export of collected, sorted plastic waste, but also emissions or leakage of emissions by outsourcing in general. Both policy and business, we need more focus on value chains outside the EU to create more impact. From a business perspective, specifically, we should design products in the context of consumer and user markets. For instance, considering waste management infrastructure in the market where you sell the product. From a policy perspective, we need CE indicators that are flexible. For instance, somehow easily include cycling of carbon at some point, and supply chain traceability. Again, from a policy perspective, we need to prioritize sector-specific closed loops, and that is to try to avoid market distortions, such as we see at the moment happening with PET recycling, for instance. And lastly, from both policy and business perspective, we need to incentivize change, both in organizations, businesses, and in consumers. And this incentivizing needs to actually be in policy, for instance. And with this, I end and will give the word next to Wolfhard.
Well, thank you, Cyprian. My name is Wolfhard Thonen van Velzen. I'm a senior researcher at Wageningen University in Research. And if there's anybody that dares to think that circularity is simple, I think you haven't paid attention yet. But that's still the challenge that we are facing, because we are dealing with a lot of stakeholders, and circularity is a hip thing, and we want to measure it and to see if we're on track. So we need something simple. Let's see if I can work with this thing. Click on it. Yeah. So this is the dream that we're all dreaming about, a simple circle. Does it exist? So you consume it home, you throw it away, it becomes milk flakes, it is returning like recycled pellets, and we make another beautiful bottle out of it. That's the dream, and that's simple, and that's what we love. But if you paid attention, you already know it ain't simple. So if we look further and try to unravel this simple circle, we already find it ain't a circle, because there's all kind of losses. People don't collect all the bottles. Some bottles are discharged in the mixed municipal waste. Some of these bottles are not so polluted that they're not able to be recycled. There are recycling losses, and in any system, the quality decays. So some of the material will not end up being a bottle, but for instance in garments or in plastic trays. Moreover, because we have losses, we need input. And the input at the moment is crude oil. So we're stuck to a system that's bound with, fixed with crude oil replenishment. On top of that, all these steps require energy, water, and chemicals. And that's maybe not so relevant for the circularity per se, but for LCA scientists that look to how much carbon dioxide we emit and other parameters, that's quite relevant. So in other scores, that's very important. Now, this is just a bottle, but the bottle has a cap, the bottle has a label, the bottle is in a crate. And if you all take all these additional aspects in consideration, it becomes quite murky and difficult already. And on top of that, we have physical laws. And one, in particular, the second law of thermodynamics, causes that the quantity is never the amount that we put in. There's always losses. There are recycling rates to consider. And the quality, we will have contamination, and we cannot prevent contamination. So we have food safety issues all the way. And yes, we can mitigate it to some extent, and that's great, but that requires additional input of energy, chemicals, and water. Not bad from a circularity point of view, but maybe bad from a carbon dioxide point of view. And yes, we can correct that, but in the whole process, we can only work if we dissipate heat. And that's known from the ages of the steam engine, I know, but also this system causes extra heat to be dissipated. Otherwise, it won't work. So circles look simple, but aren't simple. And we must account for a whole lot of things. And to do that, scientists have proposed numerous circularity indicators. And they have been developed with the best intentions by these scientists. But most of these circularity indicators are very, very complex. And of course, there are sometimes for economics, sometimes for more environmentally oriented scientists. And often they require quite complex data. So what we get then is a dashboard that is nice for geeks, but not for the average scientist or the average politician, to name a few people. And we also have the example that we have a single parameter that expresses circularity with a whole lot of aggregated data in it. Nobody is able to comprehend it. Why is the one type of material more circular according to this indicator, and then the other. You cannot really delineate it anymore and understand it. So, after a lot of debate among the four of us, we came up with we proposed a scorecard. And that went with the Scottish pace, 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and 3 steps forward, etc. But in the end, we got somewhere. And it's a proposal, not more than that. But we like to initiate this discussion to see if such a scorecard could work to comprehend circularity better and to keep it simple, because we need simplicity to understand what the heck we're doing. So this is a proposal, open for debate. It's anybody with a few brain cells can use it, and we can easily find root causes of non-circularity by looking at the questions and where we do not score maximally. So this is open for debate, and I would like to thank you already.
Great, and so then we hand over to Lucia Rigamonti from Politecnico di Milano. So yeah, you can take us through the last part of the presentation, Lucia.
Okay, thank you. So I will try to change the slide. So in the meantime, yes, I'm Lucia Rigamonti, and I'm an associate professor at the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. And so now, yes, I will talk more about this scorecard. So first of all, I have to say that we have tried to create a simple tool in order to evaluate the level of circularity of products. So the focus is on products and not, for example, on organization. And at the same time, we have decided to consider this level of circularity, including the entire life cycle of a product, so not just the end of life. And also in the preparation of the scorecard, we kept in mind the fact that the circularity should not be seen as the final aim of the circular economy, but the final aim of circular economy should be the sustainability. So in the design of the circularity scorecard, we have tried to keep in mind this, and so the scorecard tried also to capture aspects that are likely to indicate at least the environmental sustainability of the product. And the scorecard applies we can say a common sense approach. And in this sense, there is a parallelism with the waste hierarchy that is proposed in the Waste Framework Directive. And so the scorecard could work in a similar way, so this means that based on a simple priority order that in general holds true. So here you can see the scorecard. You can see that it is made of a list of questions, and the questions are related to the different life cycle stage of a product. As I told you, we consider product, but we consider the entire life cycle. So we have some questions that are related to the production step, some other questions that are related to the use step, and then the other questions are related to the end of life. So so a producer can read these questions, and then he will get a plus or a minus according to the answer to the question. So if the answer is yes or no, you can see on the right side of the scorecard that so the corresponding sign, so a plus or a minus. And at the end, so you can sum up all these plus and minus, and you can get a single score for your product. And this single score provides an indication of a level of circularity of a product under assessment. So the higher the score, the more circular the product is likely to be. But at the same time, because I told you that we have tried to consider at least the environmental sustainability in the preparation of this scorecard. So the higher the score, not only the more circular the product is likely to be, but also the higher the potential for returning environmental benefit. Okay, so now I would like to focus on two specific questions of this scorecard that are here in the violet circle. So is the product ever designed for reuse? And is the product part of a well-functioning organized system for reuse? So both questions are related with the reuse topic. And you can see that if you answer yes, you will get a plus. Okay, so this means that we can say that we are in favor of reuse options and of reusable packaging. And this is why, because we know that there are many studies that have demonstrated that in general the reuse, especially packaging reuse, is preferable compared to single-use packaging. So in general, this is true, and so we have included this in this way in the scorecard. At the same time, we know that there are some exceptions. Okay, so for example, here there is the example of glass bottle. If the refillable bottles are transported for a long distance, for example, 800 kilometers, the system, so based on reuse, is not convenient even for 40 uses. Okay, so there are some exceptions. So how can we deal with this? And we can say that we can deal with in the same way that is present also in the waste hierarchy, because you know that there is a specific comma of the Waste Framework Directive that allows a deviation from the waste hierarchy. But this is allowed only if the new solution, the new proposal is better compared to the one that is reported in the waste hierarchy, better in terms of environmental results and demonstrated by the application of the life cycle thinking approach. So the same idea can be applied also to our scorecard. And if we want to be really comprehensive, we should say that the new solution should be better compared to the one that is present in the scorecard, not only from an environmental point of view, but considering the entire concept of sustainability. And just 2 words about also the application of the life cycle thinking approach, because you know that there is an open discussion about the topic on the comparison between single-use and reusable packaging, and there is this big discussion in the preparation of the new regulation about the packaging and packaging waste. So here you can see a list of characteristics that in our idea, the LCA studies should have in order to be considered as a good study, and so good study that can be used for taking decisions. So first of all, the transparency of data, transparency of assumptions. So the report should include all the data that are used for the assessment and all the assumptions that are used in the assessment. And our important characteristic is that we cannot consider just the climate change impact category, but we should consider a larger number of indicators. And then we also need to consider that some important parameters are really influenced by the behavior of the consumers, of the users of the product. Okay, so this means that we need to include this in our assessment. We need to include this uncertainty in our assessment, and we can do this by performing a sensitivity analysis and break-even analysis. So not just to give the result for a specific situation, but we can give a larger view of the results, so how the results can change if we change these parameters that are not under our control. So this is, for me, it's all, and so now I think that we can start with the reactions and then with the discussion.
Perfect. Thanks, thanks, Lucia. Thanks to the four of you actually for taking us through this presentation. And something that I take away is that even if the circularity scorecard might be considered simple, there are quite a lot of complex considerations behind its presentation. And so the parallel with the waste hierarchy is interesting, but maybe the waste hierarchy has a level of simplicity that was born from previous complex considerations. But maybe with all the evolutions that we see in waste management, with new materials coming in, maybe those complex considerations need to evolve as well to get to a slightly new form of simplistic or more simple way forwards that looks a little bit like the waste hierarchy, which could be the circularity scorecard, or maybe the circularity scorecard can contribute to that. So now we will be listening to some reactions from decision makers, people in the business of trying to make their way through circularity, try and get to more sustainable outcomes. And after that, we'll definitely be opening the floor. So raise your hands and I'll be picking up on that and we'll be giving you the floor in about 20 to 25 minutes, okay? So first we'll have a few reactions. We'll kick off with Arnaud Mitelet. He is Public Affairs Manager at Source Alma, and he'll be giving us a little case study around the PET bottle, as our focus today is on beverage packaging. So Arnaud, over to you.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Jean-Paul for the invitation. So I'll give you a short presentation of who is Source Alma. Okay, it should work.
If not, we'll click through for you. Yep.
Oh, okay, this works. Okay, so we are a family-owned business that was launched early in the 70s, and now it was in France first, and now we are operating in 7 countries in the EU. So we'll focus on France and what we have done at the EU scale regarding the circularity of our bottles. So we have good experience in the bottling. So we cover natural waters, flavored waters. We have soft drinks, carbonated drinks, fruit drinks. I mean, we cover a wide range of portfolio of products, and we decided to go further than just handling the bottling. So we went in 2009 onto the recycling to develop the knowledge of the recycling to improve the design of our bottles. So over the last 30 years, we first decided to focus on prevention, meaning that we tried as much as possible to reduce the weight of the bottle, so to reduce the PET that is needed for bottling 1 liter of water. And then we also launched in 2016 the very first tethered cap. So now it's an obligation for the next year. So we are quite happy that this has been taken as a good example from the EU. Just so you know that Crystalline is the lightest bottle on the French market for 19 grams for 1.5 liter, so which is very low grams of PET for 1 liter bottles, which is roughly 13 to 14 grams needed. So that's what you can see on the graph on the low right hand of the slide. So we focused on making it the most optimized packaging for water and for every product that we bottle. And then we decided to go further as we started to understand better what could be done in terms of recycling, in terms of closed loop recycling. So we decided to remove when the color was not fitted for recycling in terms of bottles to bottles scheme. So we decided to remove all the green, the red, and other colors, and we decided also on the blue ones to reduce them as much as possible so that they are sorted properly in the sorting centers and that they can go next to our recycling facilities to make new bottles from it. So that's kind of the definition for us in terms of high quality of recycling. It is the best design for recycling that we can make as an industry, and then to understand what are the processes of recycling. So in 2009, we started with the Roxpet in the north of France, so which is roughly 15,000 tons of rPET every year that we produce on this site. And we decided to be integrated to the value chain and other economic operators that are involved in the recycling processes. So we put our facility just across the street of Normalplast, who was handing the bales. So they were doing the sorting, putting the bottles into bales and sending us the flakes, which was washed and ready for regeneration. So that was the very first one that helped us to understand how PET and rPET works. So we started from 2009 to increase the recycled content into our bottles. And to go further, we decided in 2021 to launch one-of-a-kind recycling center in the center of France, which was the second one for more than 20,000 tons of rPET every year. So what is important here is that we integrated the recycling process. So we, on the same site, without transportation, we go from the flakes that is recycled into rPET by Roxpet. We move to Regina to produce the preforms for half of the group that we need in terms of preform to bottle our products. And on the same side, we can bottle with those preforms 2 of our natural mineral brands. So in this view, we have a very closed loop circularity and a very short space to make it. So this is a way also to improve the carbon footprint of our packaging, which is now very important because we have to aim for neutral carbon footprint for every industry. And then, we just did the grand opening of the last of the 3 of our recycling facility, which is this one in Belgium. And we went a bit further with this one. So we are involved with Veolia. So we receive the bales and we handle all the sorting of the bales, the bottles. We do the rPET and we send it to the facilities we have in the range of 100 kilometers away from Filao to do the bottling and put the bottles with natural and spring water on the Belgian market. So that's for us what was the best option regarding the collection rate of bottles in Belgium. So we try to show in France that at the industry scale, the circularity of our bottle was possible. And now we kind of have proven that it was also feasible on the national scale with the Belgium case study. So also, just to show you the knowledge we have and how it helps us to improve the design of our bottles, is that now we know how it works to sort the bales. We know how to wash the flakes. We know the sorting of the flakes and etc. Up to the incorporation of rPET into our bottles. So we have from 25% rPET up to 100% rPET into some of our products. So which is good, and we start to improve on that, and we are already at 30% on average on our bottles of rPET. And this is important because we always showcase the circularity as a circle, but we wanted to make it flat so people understand that it is indeed not that easy to have the circularity, and there are many steps in the process before we can make the bottle-to-bottle scheme. And for us, with all of that, the goal is to be the first 100% circular French bottler by 2025. So with the capacity of RPT production we'll be able to recycle 100% of the bottles we put on the market. So this is one of the ways for us to have the circularity on the PET of our packaging. Of course, we do still have some room for improvement, like we need to reach also the circularity on the other part of our packaging, such as the labels, such as the caps. And now also we have to improve the carbon footprint of our factories. So for instance, at Philao, we implemented solar panels on the roof of the factory. We decided to implement also a system for the reuse of the water that is needed. We kind of also design the processes to get back the energy that we use or the calories that is needed for other part of the processes. So it's always an improvement, and it's always we always as an industry appreciate all the inputs from the academics to better understand how we could work and where we should aim for our packaging. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Arnaud, for taking us through an example of, trying to achieve more circularity in practice. I mean, I'm sure there are certain decisions that could be discussed, and that's also why you're here. So if there are any comments or questions, we'll be taking those up in a few minutes. We'll now move to another decision maker in this business of trying to get towards more circularity, and that's the policymaker, or at least science in support of policymaking. And so we're joined by Davide Tonini from the Joint Research Center at the European Commission. Davide, welcome. I think you'll be just giving us a reaction, right, Davide?
Yes. Hello,
Perfect.
everybody.
Over to you.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me. Yes, well, I was with interest listening to all of you, and it's nice to see that there is so many good brains working around circularity. But I think the take-home message I got is that there is a lot to do and little clarity so far. I think the direction that was proposed in some of the presentations, notably from, well, I don't recall the name, but I think Theodor and then Lucia on simplifying a recipe to simplify circularity, probably the way forward for industry. However, I also think that there are probably many levels that are needed. That's one level, the simplified one. But then I'm thinking about indicators and other models that are required for decision making, tracking, circularity, monitoring. For those, I don't think we need simplification. Well, to some extent, but what we see is lack of good models to capture the effects of circularity. For instance, from the discussion, I was a little bit. Perhaps it was somehow implicit, but I felt it was missing some aspects. For instance, the aspects of quality in recycling was in your presentation in the last one, but was not really touched upon earlier. So how do we measure quality, and what is ultimately we want to substitute primary production, right? So why not looking at simply the reduction of primary production? In that, there are two elements. One is the quality, so how much we can displace with one unit, and the other one is if we are taking the right waste stream. And here I know John, that we want to focus on plastic packaging today, but I just made a calculation that you're all good academics and you will know it already, but we are talking about plastic packaging, 2% of the waste generated in Europe. 2.5 when excluding major mineral waste. So I was wondering also if there should be a way upstream to get the priorities right. Before getting into the hypo that was mentioned by some of you, the hypes, the fashionable streams. Before that, if there was a way to focus on the priority streams, and I'm raising it as an argument for discussion also. Today, I don't mind to focus on packaging, but I think pet packaging is around less than 1% of the waste. And the implications about our security, European security in terms of supply, which was the first argument for circularity back in 2015. How I wonder how important that is in that respect. I know that there are other issues like the plastic in the ocean and littering and mismanagement and so forth. But getting back to the roots of and the motivations behind circularity, which is mainly security and independency, mainly. I wonder if that is if we are getting it right in the first place. If you follow what I where I'm heading. Other than that, I think once we focus on a specific aspect like pet, then all these methodologies are welcome, and there is no consensus, as you would agree with me on what we should need. And I very much agree with what was suggested by Lucia to get to some sort of simplification for industries and companies, and then also for policy in general, sort of hierarchy that holds true in most often, as mentioned. I think that's the way forward. And then on top of that, I mentioned that there is the other level of indicators for circularity and models that can capture that, which I think are probably at required. They require another discussion. But to me, it's also very important and very, I don't know, very interesting the fact that we're focusing on a few percent of the waste, well, less than a few percent, and it's our topic of today. So I wonder if we, I know it's a topic. I would like someone to tell me why we are taking this and not construction and demolition waste as a main topic for circularity. But this is probably just food for thought. And
well, I would assume that scientific assessment doesn't necessarily lead to political judgment and values, you know, and so what might be considered scientifically of less importance might be of really, really high importance when it comes to policy for a bunch of reasons that we could discuss. But I think it's fair that you put the question of scope and what we're talking about in relation to waste streams more generally, and that you identify the question of, you know, reducing the reliance on primary materials. And maybe that's something that we can get some feedback on later. So thanks a lot for that. We'll just then go to our last reaction from the academia. I'd like to hand over the floor to Monia Niero from the Santa Anna School of Advanced Studies. It's also important to get the feedback from academia, especially when you're academics putting forward a paper. So Monia, you've also prepared a little bit of a reaction to that. Can you take us through your initial thoughts on this? And then we'll definitely be opening the floor. I can see there are people who really want to join in, so hopefully we can do that. Over to you, Monia.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be here. And as soon as I'm able, maybe now, to show my presentation, maybe I can just start. Yes, thank you. Maybe I would just say a few words about the Santa Anna School of Advanced Studies, which is a public research university in Italy, based in Pisa with a special statue and I'm now an associate professor in sustainability and climate interdisciplinary center, and my background is mainly from an LCA perspective. I think this will also help to show some of the questions that I'm gonna raise. If I'm able to move. But first of all, I think I would like to thank my colleagues for having initiated this discussion. I think it's very important. I particularly like the word that you use, so meaningful, inclusive, and practical, because I think that we tend a lot in academia to, I mean, we love complicated models, but sometimes we also need to think that our models should be applicable and applied. And I think that the scorecard is at least a very good entry point to start the discussion about circularity. And what I have prepared are mainly 3 points of discussion. And the first one is about the meaning of circularity and the link between circular economy and sustainability. The second is the proposed scorecard and particularly the learnings that we have had from the application of the waste hierarchy. And the third point is about the general topic of sustainability assessment of circularity strategies, and particularly which is the role for life cycle assessment and life cycle sustainability assessment in this discussion. So starting from the first point, I could see that Eleni also used this quote from the paper. And so you said correctly that there is not such a thing as circular materials, components, or products. There are different degrees of circularity or resource efficiency. And my question here is, what's the difference between resource efficiency and circularity? Are we talking about the same thing? Are those two same concept? One is the evolution of the other. Is it like a new circularity? Is it just a new word for saying resource efficiency? So that's, let's say, the first stone that I'm putting into the lake for further discussion. And also on this point, the next slide, yes. Also between the link between circularity and circular economy, together with some colleagues led by Sina Leipold, we we developed a paper where we discussed let's say, through interviews with other academics, we tried to identify the different links that there are between the concept of circularity and sustainability. And what we could find is that there are, let's say, 3 different narratives when we talk about the link between circular economy and sustainability. So we have an optimist narrative, which takes circular economy as a fundamental part of sustainability transformation. Then there is a second one, which is called what we call the reformist narrative, which argues that circular economies has a transformative potential, but only if social and environmental boundary conditions are met. And then there is a third one, which is a skeptical narrative, which questions the general usefulness of a circular economy for sustainability transformation. So my question to you is, what's your view on, I mean, which is the narrative that you agree with? I mean, you, but of course, all the audience. Going to the second point of discussion, so the proposed scorecard, you said that it adopts a product-centric approach, although you have used material, component, and product system and recycling process in your argumentation. And here I was thinking, what's the link between materials, components, product system, and recycling processes in a circular economy for beverage packaging? So I understand that you started this thinking about products, but what's the link between all these different elements? And also, as you have shown, you were highly inspired by the waste hierarchy. And here I was thinking, you all have broad experience in the application of the waste hierarchy in the waste management sector. Is there any learning that we can take from the application of the waste hierarchy that can also be transferred to the circularity discussion in the beverage packaging sector? I think you have already shown some example, but is there anything that we can consider? And the third point is the link between, so you said that the development of measuring of circularity and the monitoring of circularity requires indicators that are fit for purpose, and that those indicators must be complemented. Here I'm quoting you. It must be complemented by comprehensive sustainability assessments that should also include, rebound effects and trade-offs. And here is my question is, what's the role for LCA and LCSA in the circularity discussion? And with this regard, I think I would like to, I was too quick. Can we go to the previous one? Yes, thanks. So this is like a proposal, like a framework that I suggested recently, which let's say put in the framework of the proposal for the new regulation on packaging and packaging waste. The idea is to learn from, let's say, quantitative environmental sustainability assessment methods, which are, for instance, material flow analysis that allows to have an overview of what's the packaging production, and of course LCA, which allows to quantify the environmental impact with some approaches that are, let's say, we can call them socio-technical approaches that are coming more from the social sciences and try to link all the different actors and what's their role in the circular economy discussion, and also what are the practices that lead the consumer to act in a certain way. Can this be a solution? Maybe you have also other ideas that can, let's say, put also LCA and LCSA in all this discussion. And I think with this, I'm done, and I thank you, and I would like, I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks a lot, Monia. Yeah, you raised a few questions. I would almost consider them challenges to our four academics, but I'm sure they live off challenges, so hopefully they'll be able to pick up on those. I have been informed, though, that we do have one academic, Steven de Meester from the University of Ghent, I believe, who has prepared also a little bit of a challenge or reaction to the paper. So, Steven, do you want to take us through that? Quick unmutes. Yeah, when you're ready.
Yes, that's very important. I hope you hear me, you see my slides.
Yes.
And sorry for not sending them in advance. I make a mess of my agenda usually. So a reaction from my side, first introducing myself. I'm Steven de Meester. I'm professor at Ghent University and Maastricht University. I work on separation technologies in the circular economy, meaning we remove impurities from plastic waste, which can be inks, adhesives, nihas of all kinds, polymers from each other. When it's possible, mechanical, and not possible, we use chemistry and so on. But I'm not here to talk about myself today. I'm talking about a reaction on that paper. That was what I was asked. So if you look how I look to this debate, indeed, it's a relevant topic, because you see here there's papers saying that there's 114 definitions of circular economy and so on. If you look to the European Commission definition, you see this: to maintain the value of products. And actually, if you look to the end of waste criteria, you actually see a bit of trend that it's about value, that products can be used, as market demand existing, and so on. But of course, all these definitions rely on the concept that there should be value over the life cycles, over the different cycles of a product over time. So this brings us to the second question: what is value? Or what is quality? And then this definition, quality, is very important, but this and value, but this is less defined, of course. So if we want to define circular economy, in a way, we also have to define value, because if we don't do that, we're like Alice in the woods. So we're walking. She asking, where do we need to go? She asked the cat, but then the cat say, where do you want to go to? And then, of course, then you can take any road and it will take you nowhere. So we need to also define value and quality. So in principle, I'm agreeing with the team that circular economy and looking to the essence of circular economy is an important topic. We worked a bit on it ourselves, so I will first give a bit, let's say 2 minutes on our work, and then give a further reaction on the work that was presented in the paper by the 4 authors. So the work we did was basically starting from a definition of a report of Grant et al. And starting from the end of waste criteria. How shall we define quality of recycling? And I know I'm diving directly already on recycling, whereas actually the circular economy, of course, is in a way broader, making us independent of imports and scarce materials. So there's one strategy, of course, using less for a certain application. The other is, I think, recycling and keeping value in the different R strategies. But if we're looking to recycling, then in a way, what we want is to replace virgin or avoid virgin in first instance, but in second instance, replace virgin materials, which can be metals or plastics or whatever, which means we should do it with a low environmental impact, and which means that we should have a time dimension, meaning keeping things in our society over time. So we, in this paper, we, together with David, who was here giving a reaction before, we defined this framework where there's these 3 axes: a time axis, environmental footprint analysis, and a virgin displacement potential axis, where one is, of course, the yield of a recycling chain or of a circular economy strategy. But second is, what can you do in the end with the material? So what is the potential for substitution? I will dive very short in this dimension and this dimension. So in the substitution dimension, the assumption here is that you have to look deeper in the functionality of certain applications, because, okay, you can say it's good or bad material, but especially for plastics, this becomes very complicated, and you have certain applications where you need certain properties to actually be suitable or adequate for the application. And in plastic, sometimes that property is high, sometimes that property is low. So that makes it for plastics even more complicated. So what you have to do is look which applications are on the market for a certain material like PET, and what are the quality requirements for these different applications. And then we have to look what are the quality of the recyclates coming out of circular economy strategies or recycling strategies. So we defined this framework where we say, okay, you have applications, different markets, which could be packaging, bottles, trays, etc. And this could then be market textiles, but in principle, this could hold for any of these material types. And then, okay, you have waste coming in, and this waste has certain mechanical properties, processability, aesthetics, chemical load, which contributes to safety, and then legal boundaries. So these are, let's say, criteria that you would need to set to say, okay, my regranulate or my recyclate is suitable for a certain application or not. So this would mean a big exercise, deep diving in the technical properties of recyclates and looking if they are actually suitable to be applied anywhere. And then we have to look first at a product perspective, but second in a market perspective, how much of which materials are there, how big are these markets, and then make a big scientific puzzle. The second dimension is the time axis, where we have to say, okay, we start at a certain moment with a virgin material, and over time we use a material. So the use phase is important because reusing is also a proper strategy. But at the end of their life, you lose a bit of material during the recycling or improper collection, etc. You go to second stage and so on. So this is in-use occupation indicator, where we did an example in this paper. I will not dive too deep in there, where you say, okay, we start with 100 tons of PET. If you go bottle to bottle, you would have a yield, let's say, of around 70% roughly. that you have after recycling. Then you go to the next bottle. You lose some of the material in recycling again. Next bottle, etc. But your tail is quite long because your yield of the recycling or the end-of-life recycling rate is quite high. If you would substitute a bottle with a textile, we have to look to the other red line where you see, okay, I have a bottle which has a 6-month lifetime. Then I go to a textile, which is fast fashion, maybe a year and a half lifetime, and then we drop because actually after the textile life cycle we cannot recover the material anymore, or at least this is not a common practice in there. So this time axis in that sense is also very relevant. So you see the area under the curve is important, and because the PET bottles you have a long tail, meaning you keep the material in your economy. So that's a deep dive for how I look to this problem. Very technical. We go to melt flow index, we go to E modulus, impact strength, and so on. But of course, I'm in a university. I'm in my ivory tower and I like numbers and I'm a bit a nerd in that. And I can understand very well the perspective of the authors of the paper that they think I'm making things too complicated, and maybe others as well. So I understand that perspective very well. So maybe I have to come out of my ivory tower and say, this might be, I do think it's still valuable at some levels, but I do also say that probably it's not bad if there's more simple approaches next to this. So this is how I see the paper that was presented by the 4 authors. I will not run over the framework because they have done it themselves. And I do like the approach. And actually, when I read it, I found a bit the parallel if you look to some of the labels. For example, if you look to the EU Eco label, what is done there, the procedure, I will not dwell, because Davide is also here, you would be able to do it very much better, how you make the Eco label criteria, because in the end you get the label if you get certain criteria. Now these criteria in a way are derived from market studies, laws, LCA, environmental analysis, but we're very well aware that it's not always easy to do all this analysis. But the Eco label, they make a checklist based on what is important in the environmental aspects of a certain product type. So based on detailed analysis like LCA, they define where are hotspots and what are best practices within these hotspots and so on. So they kind of try to make the extensive LCA and other analysis compatible with something that is in a way deriving to more simple criteria that you can say yes or no, I achieved them, yes or no, like is actually similar yes or no in this system. Okay, the Eco label goes a bit beyond by putting detailed values and calculation procedures on every axis, but that's another point. Another example that came to me in mind is the cradle-to-cradle label. It's not very common for PET bottles, I would assume, but in flooring, it's a bit more common. So what you see there is that they have these categories: material health, material reutilization, and so on. And if you dive deeper in these categories, you see material health. They look to, okay, we know what the waste stream is. We know how much maybe toxic materials there are, but also they have this kind of material reutilization score. And this is actually calculated in a way saying, okay, my product contains X% recycled content and my product is X% recyclable. So they combine, they make a kind of score based on is it recycled and is it recyclable, which were also branches in the tree of the paper, if I recall it correctly. So based on that, they also make this kind of categories. Okay, it's a bit a commercial approach, of course, gold, silver, and so on. But you see this logic coming back. There are detailed analyses saying that, or knowing common sense, knowing that the safety and formulation is important, that the recycling is important, and based on these complicated analyses, based on a bit of perception, you define more simple approaches that are easier to be used and maybe also easier to marketing than these complicated approaches. So conclusion, I completely agree with the authors that it's a very relevant topic. For me, the circular economy is a strategy that keeps us less dependent on resources that are scarce in some way. You could say critical, even though you come then in the criticality definitions, but I would say just scarce of resources that we don't have in Europe. So there's a few options. If you say resource efficiency versus circular economy, I think circular economy is maybe mainly focused on, I would say the keeping the materials in the loop, whereas resource efficiency, also, for example, the energy you put in to produce something becomes a bit more pronounced, is how I look to this. But there are indeed a lot of similarities. So either we use less resources or we recycle them. The goal of recycling is then to keep the resources in the loop at adequate quantity and quality over time. Some approaches are complicated, like the ones we developed, but I do think to really go to the essence of this kind of substitution, you need to dive into the really technical details, else you keep on meta discussions. And then I do think that the simplified versions should complement, because we need to act now, and to act now, sometimes we need also simplified approaches. So that was my presentation.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and you also introduced this notion of the timeline, and that you know, that also affects our view on circularity and how much it can be maintained over time in different products, within the same product or with different products. So that's also, I think, an important component that you're adding there. So we've had lots of reactions. I see a couple of people have been raising their hands. So I think I'll try and give the floor to Matt George. Matt, I've enabled your microphone. You should be able to just jump in. And you've been very patient. So please, can you just briefly introduce yourself and, you know, give us your thoughts?
Thank you very much, Jean-Paul. Yeah, my name is Matt Georges. I'm an economist working for the CFlex project, which stands for a circular economy for flexible packaging in Europe. We do a lot of work with Stephen Denista. Hello, Stephen. I didn't realise you're on the call, but nice to hear from you. So I really like the kind of tick box flowchart nature of what's being designed. I guess one of my thoughts on it is how you deal with the kind of quantity-quality trade-off, which is not so obvious when it comes to PET bottles, because that's pretty much, I think, most people agree that is a closed loop, closed product loop. You know, you go from bottles, you keep it all separate, it goes back to bottles. With a lot of other plastics, especially flexible plastics, you have a trade-off that you have to make between, if you want to make it flexible plastic going back into flexible plastic packaging, especially through contact, then the only way to do that at the moment is basically chemical recycling, and that is energy intensive, and you lose a lot of material that you would be able to keep in your system if you were, for want of a better phrase, downcycling it using mechanical recycling. So that you might take flexible plastic that have been used for food packaging and that is then recycled and is put to, I don't know, like new rigids, for example, or I don't know, refuse cells, that kind of thing, or plastic carrying out. So I wasn't sure how that trade-off is dealt with in the system that's been proposed. And I guess a secondary, slight secondary question to that is, how do you even deal with each of those? Because we eventually have to make a decision, and you're comparing apples and pears. You're comparing greenhouse gas emissions to landfill take, or I don't know, use of certain chemicals that have toxic properties. So it's the kind of both elements to that.
Thanks. So yeah, the quality trade-offs on material recycling, and then this notion of, you know, on the one hand, let's say CO2, and on the other, things that would be more related to preventing littering and things like that. Those kinds of decisions, and they're quite different. So the four authors, bear that in mind. Okay, those two angles. I'll also bring in Hermis Panagiotopoulos. I will enable your microphone now, and then you'll be able to jump in. Please let us know your reaction.
Thank you, Jean-Paul, and thank you very much for pronouncing right my name, which is the most difficult part. Yes, I think it's a very good event, and it's a very much needed, both from a scientific and a political point of view. And sorry, I cannot hear you very well, and I hope that you don't have a lot of noise because I'm outside. So yes, there are many definitions about circularity, but we need to make our mind on what circularity we want. Do we want a circularity to happen inside Europe, or we want a circularity that comes from third world countries? That's the first point. then the point that David mentioned about scalability and what about why we speak for a so small percentage of the problem, etc., and bring other sectors, etc. Fully agree. The answer, though, is that because in every discussion when we speak about circularity, we tend to focus on the low-hanging fruit. Maybe it's a human reaction, but we feel that by sorting that out, the whole low-hanging fruit, others will follow. And what do? We go to a beverage PET, not PET in bottle in general, but beverage PET bottles. Look at the Single-Use Plastic Directive in Europe in July 2019. So we tend to focus that. Another thing is that PET is the most recyclable polymer and the most recycled at scale around the globe. When, because I'm following and currently I'm in Bangkok for a global plastic summit, but when we discuss at UN level, both at the Conference of Parties, COP, or in the Global Plastics Treaty, in the UN Global Plastics Treaty, we only talk about beverage PET bottles and EPR, DRS, and refill, which all this relates to packaging, while the issue is Global Plastic Pollution Treaty, and not Global Packaging Treaty or not Global PET Beverage Treaty, which I feel that following the discussions in Sharm el Sheikh and in Paris and soon in Nairobi and here in Bangkok, I feel that we need to change the name of the treaty because we tend to focus on what exists today on a very small, and I fully agree with David because it's really the least importance and is the easiest. We don't need too much innovation. It's the easiest to solve by making collection rights with very efficient deposit refund systems everywhere. And we don't have, and we reutilize DRS also for reuse. So we have any refillable bottles and via recycling. So we use the whole circularity. So to give you last, because I don't want to take much of your time and I might be very loud where I am. An example of non-circularity, which I see in Sharm el Sheikh in COP27 in Egypt, and I see everywhere I go lately when it's about UN. We speak about packaging water. First of all, we need to decide, do we want to continue with packaging water? Because the feeling I get is that we go around circles and we package water in multi-material in order to show that we are not bottling in PET packaging or in plastic. Not to make it personal, but for them it's plastic. So we need to make our mind because beverage cartons, it was in the green zone in COP27. It is here in Bangkok now. And I am sure that it was in Paris for Global Plastics Treaty. And I'm sure in Nairobi in 1 month, it will be also the same. So just a reflection, but very important that when we speak about circularity of beverage, we need to make sure that this actually happens and to use the materials that bring the best environmental footprint. Sorry,
okay.
Jean-Paul,
and maybe just to clarify also, just tell us your organization and your role just very quickly.
Sorry, yes. I work for Indorama Ventures. Indorama Ventures is the biggest virgin PET resin producer in the world and also the biggest PET recycler in the world.
Okay.
With
thanks.
presence 147 plants in 35 countries.
Just to have context for people who might not know you. Okay, thanks, Ami. So we have this question also of, let's say, scale and scope of what we're discussing here more specifically today with our focus. I don't think the circularity scorecard necessarily is only about beverage packaging or PET bottles specifically, but it's true that that was one of the examples that was taken. Can I then, well, I'll also add in Davide as a quick reaction, please.
Yeah, just a quick reaction on the scorecard. I was re-looking at that, and it's a question to the authors. Maybe also to clarify for the audience, to what extent that a scorecard includes, I was looking twice now, again, I did, and I could see that is very much actually product oriented, as Monia also suggested, or waste related. To what extent it includes circularity in the broader meaning, for example, repurposing of buildings, for instance, product services, car sharing, for instance, alternative feedstock, for instance, longer durability, longer lifetime. To what extent is this captured there? I was wondering if this, because now you know the Commission is moving. Well, the intention is to move to the broader sense of circularity, and probably the waste will get a bit less of an emphasis compared to the past, at least, you know, as a future. And I was wondering to what extent that captures these aspects. And then just a quick reaction, I think, on Stephen. He went very much into the details, which I think probably is overwhelming for many, but at the same time, it's illustrative, I think, because on one hand we can simplify things, but on the other hand, many of you will be aware of the ECAs, the European Court of Auditor, that you know, warned the Commission on last summer on the current status of circularity, which is 11%. So if PET, for instance, as mentioned by Aris, is already well recycled, or on the way to be 50, 60, 70, in Germany 95% recycled, and the current circularity rate is 10%. So again, where is the problem, and what is the problem that we should address as Europe? The plastic or the PET, or I mean the PET or the plastic as a whole, or some other stream, to increase this 10% circularity rate that we have today? Because that's ultimately what we are talking about, the circularity, and that's the ultimate indicator that we can use, this circular material use rate. You find it, to Google it. So in a way, the complex explanation that Stephen gave with the quality is useful, is functional to explain why we are not there. Because for many materials, we are recycling, but with poor quality. While with PET, we are doing it already good. And that's why I think this discussion is redundant, probably. For other materials, like buildings, that is the majority of the waste, we are not there, and then you can extend the argument to food waste, to other flows that are 3, 5, 10 times plastic, but that are recycled to a low quality level today. And I wonder if, yeah, ultimately we're talking about circularity, right? Not circularity of PET or PET bottle. But and yeah, then there was a question on scorecard that maybe my colleague, some of the scientists can take on the broader sense of circularity.
Okay, thanks. I will try and bring in then the academics who wish to react. I don't know which one would like to, but I think in particular, let's start with this question of the quality of materials. And as we're talking about decision making, should we let it to the market to basically make the trade-offs that are necessary when you're trying to, you know, build your product portfolio? You need to make trade-offs, or should policy actually invest in very specific requirements on the uptake of recycled materials, despite quality issues? Because I think that was a little bit the point being made by Matt, and I'd like to get your views on that and how you see that playing out in relation to the scorecard and things like that. I don't know who would like to have a go at that one.
I will have a go first, if you're happy. Thanks. I think that the paper has been misunderstood. My understanding is, from listening to the reactions of the different people, the point of the paper was to show that circularity, we are not doing well in understanding circularity. So the point of the paper was to show that there are a lot of levels of information that we need to take into account when we are considering circularity. There are a lot of processes, structures, and values embedded into achieving circularity, and therefore we have to start from somewhere understanding it. The circularity scorecard is a simplified way using the beverage bottle as an example. Why? Because the PET beverage bottle is one of the materials that are supposed to be recycled and therefore circular, but are they really? No. And that's the point we're trying to make. It's not returning back to the economy in the way it should be, or it could be. The idea around quality is something that we include as part of our values, value dimensions, if you like. What is value? It's environmental, it's economic, it's social, it's technical, it's political. All of these are the values that determine how we go about circularity of our resources and our waste. So yes, quality is important because to some extent, well, quite high extent, it determines the different roads of circularity, if you like, that we can introduce into the system. And circularity is not a perfect cycle. You have to first understand what are the values embedded in the different resources, different or wasted resources, as I like to call them. And then you can try to chart and decide what works and what not in promoting some kind of efficiency in the way these wasted resources are going to be kept in the system or return or in different forms. They may not even return the same form. So I think we need to understand what we're talking about here. Because if we don't understand and we don't create a platform where we can understand the importance of these things, then we will always work in this fragmented, disintegrated manner.
And this is also, I think, the purpose behind trying to organize this session from the paper, that it's something, you know, to be discussed. I mean, there's nothing set in stone here. There's a lot of uncertainty still, a lot of questions to be answered. Does anyone else want to react on this question of the quality of materials out of the four there? Ulfard, Cyprian, Lucia, a quick reaction?
Quite happy what Eleni said, to be honest. There's little to be add to that. Her last sentence was very important because there is a lot of confusion between various stakeholders and their pipe dreams for the future for our resource management of Europe. And that is, I think, the struggle that both academics and businesses have at the moment. We have elected politicians with all good intentions try to create a more sustainable society because they don't understand LCAs. They have created circularity as a proxy of sustainability, and now we're hunting down circularity, but we do not know at the moment if we're achieving the ultimate goal of sustainability. And that's, I think, the most important point for today.
Okay, and Cyprian, I'll let you jump in there.
Well, I'll try to respond to some extent to Davide as well on his points, including the aspect of quality. Well, we basically tested this scorecard on PET, but the scorecard itself, as we designed it, was meant to be basically used to any product, applied to absolutely any product. And I was thinking even from some of the examples that Davide gave, for instance, for a component used in construction. In construction in buildings, for instance, let's say it's a part of a window, that could easily be assessed with the same scorecard here. And it doesn't necessarily need to even be plastic. It was meant to be general and able to apply to anything, basically. The main point of the scorecard is that it's rewarding tracing, basically, it's rewarding traceability. So you both need to know where your material comes from and where it's going, and if the material enters is designed to face basically the recycling industry that's out there. For instance, if we talk about reuse, it could be also a form of reuse that is outside the packaging industry. Of course, if it's something that, yeah, I don't have maybe a good example, but it could be reused in the building industry, a component as well. So I just want to emphasize that although we tested it on PET, that does take a little bit away from actually the broader scope that we meant with the paper, and that was actually looking at something simple that can be applied to any product by industry. So if you design a new product, whatever that is, it probably works better if it's not very complex, so not many materials, right? Because then you would have to maybe answer the question for each material that enters the product itself. But it should be possible to answer it for any product, basically, and get a score, or a score that indicates where your product stands, because it makes you think a bit about where the materials come from, how they are used in terms of use, and then what happens with these materials at the end of life. Are you designing your product to enter what today works? Or, yeah, and also it makes you think about the context where your products go as well, because we emphasize the markets where the product is sold as well, that it has to be designed for that context specific. So I hope this clarifies a bit the thoughts that Davide had, and of course we're completely aware that PET is a small part of a very complex plastic landscape, of course, and even in the sense of I think the comment earlier on the fact that yes, it works to some extent. To some extent, it works for PET, but for many other plastics, it doesn't really work. And even if we would like a closed loop, it's hard to see how this would work for other plastics because of their degradation rates and so on. But I was trying to imagine while he was commenting, for instance, on polyethylene, if that would work as a polyethylene bag, if that would work in our product scorecard here, what it would say, right? Because we do recycle those to maybe garbage bags, and the fact that those then don't get recycled again is captured, for instance, in this simple scorecard. So in a way, we try to put it together from a perspective that it should work in a very simple way to any product. Of course, it doesn't work to everything, and we don't capture all of the options, such as bioplastics that was mentioned earlier, or even to more complex approaches like carbon capture and utilization as well. Of course, it would need to be extended in some ways, but that's not the point. We wanted to kind of make a demonstration of the fact that you could maybe use something very simple to kind of focus on traceability and on quality, maintaining high-level quality loops. That would be the best indication of sustainability. Of course, even this would have to be verified by more complex assessment, such as LCA or sustainability assessment, right? But at least as in the spirit of the waste hierarchy, it should indicate kind of the priority. So sector-specific closed loop is kind of what we put at the top, in a sense, and then. Yeah, we take it from there.
Yeah, thanks. And it's true that then, I mean, there are all these questions around scale and how important is the issue that we're a little bit more focusing on today in relation to PET. But then there's also the reality, which are obligations towards circularity, let's say, to put it that way, on very specific products or sectors that are not necessarily the same obligations when you look at the broader waste streams. And this will also obviously affect decisions and the push to make decisions quickly with high ambition. And does that always then rhyme with sustainability? I mean, these are also considerations that is also why businesses probably are trying to find, pathways and support and guidance. I'd like to bring in Michael Surgaard, I think. I don't know. Please chip in with your reaction.
Yeah, thank you.
And a quick introduction.
Yeah, hello, Michael Jørgensen. I'm from Aalborg University campus in Copenhagen, our Department of Sustainability and Planning. Yeah, I was just thinking about all this focus on circularity. Now we have just seen in Denmark the first circularity gap report, and what that consultant company that make these national and regional circularity reports have realized is that circularity is a very, very bad indicator, because it doesn't really say anything about sustainability. So what they have come up with is they need to combine the circularity of to what extent resources are feeding back in, but also with the weight of the mass flow or resource flow and the climate impact from it. So even those that, so to say, mostly speak about circularity and got a lot of awareness about the circularity gap have realized that it's a very bad indicator. And as they say in the Danish report, a little for fun, okay, you could imagine you tear down all the houses tomorrow, and then the day after you build them with the same materials. Circularity will be 100%. But it's, I mean, so yeah, we need a more complex number or scope of assessing what is the right strategy.
Yeah, interesting. A nice comment, you know, towards the end of the meeting that we've been discussing circularity, that it's the wrong indicator. But it is actually the essence of the discussion is, you know, circularity is out there. You know, it is a reality. And then the question is how to make it somehow meaningful when it's such a pervasive term in public discourse, in policy, in business decision making as well. Lucia.
Yeah. So I would like to answer to this reaction, and I think that it is also linked with one of the questions that was in Monia presentation. So which role for LCA and for life cycle sustainability assessment in the circularity discussion? So maybe it was not very clear. Now I can say it more explicitly. So I think that to create this scorecard, okay, we need to perform LCA and life cycle sustainability assessment, and also all the complex analysis and calculations that were presented by Steven. So all these complex studies, I think, that are the base for this circularity scorecard. So at the moment, this is just a proposal of a circularity scorecard with some questions. We have created this based on our experience, but obviously this can be improved, and especially the final version of this scorecard, I think that should be based on all the complex studies. But in this way, scientists perform these complex studies and then prepare the simple scorecard that can be used by industry. So industry at this point do not have to perform the LCA or the life cycle sustainability assessment or the assessment of the quality of the recycled material and so on, because all of this is the base for the design of the scorecard. Okay, so we are not saying that we measure circularity without all the complex studies, but the complex studies are the base for this simple tool.
Okay, so the complex studies do need to be carried out, but there's a pace and there's a speed, and that's also something I would just like to maybe come back to the four authors of the paper, because there are different senses of speed as well in different product sectors with different end games. In some product sectors, there are effectively product bans that could be placed. In other sectors, it might be different types of measures that will orient decisions. So how do you also view all these decisions to be made in such a limited time? I don't know, maybe that's also something that you could reflect on. Cyprian, I see that you have your hand raised, so please chip in.
It was more to comment on Michael's remark from earlier, which I fully agree with, because I've seen the circularity result for Denmark recently, and of course, I think in our paper we also we do mention the fact that we don't want to cement certain policies that make it mandatory to, for instance, measure circularity in certain ways, because this type of policy cements basically the need to just calculate things and and report circularity. But not all circularity is worth doing. Of course, like Michael mentioned, the nice example with tearing down houses that you just built. And I fully agree with that, and we do agree with that. But of course, there's not an easy answer to that, except that we have to make policymakers aware that they should make their policies somehow relatively flexible to the edge of knowledge that we have, or the edge of research that we have, where we learn all the time that some circularity might not be useful at all. But we see the opposite. Policy is more complex and more cemented all the time, and there's more demands on industry and consumers as well. And the reaction to, well, at least the reaction when we know that things are not put in the right way should be quite fast. But we know, of course, it's a huge machine, and it takes many years until actually something is able to be changed. Yes, so in a sense, I fully agree with Michael, your comment there to conclude.
Okay, I'd like to bring in Anne Kristin. You requested the floor. Please chip in.
Yes, so first of all, I'm sorry if this was discussed earlier. I joined a bit late, but it's just a quick comment for the term of circularity.
Maybe just a quick introduction, just a quick introduction.
I'm coordinating a research network at the Technical University of Munich. So what I see, what we're lacking is a common understanding of what circularity means, and that's what has been discussed also here before, but more also in the sense of, does it only take one cycle? Does it take multiple cycles? At which amount of cycles is it circular? Because as we also heard, it cannot go on forever. So at some point, maybe you need to introduce raw material again. Is it then still circular? Is it a downgraded circularity? Or I think we're lacking a definition that is clarifying this term of circularity more, and also distinguishing it from just recycling, for example. And yeah, I think that was the main thing. And then I just had some thoughts to the circular gap report as well, on that. What I would find fun is a tool where you first of all, you need tons of data about different materials, but then you could calculate this, a maximum or minimum amount of cycles that this material can go through with the current technologies. Maybe you can even choose between different technologies. I'm imagining this a little bit like the LCA tools. And then you can calculate in a way the amount of cycles that this material can go through, maybe including some, okay, this percentage of new raw material need to go in at this stage. And that tool could simplify this choosing between materials or calculating circularity a little bit.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I mean, no, I think it's an important contribution that you're making, and it comes back to this idea of the timeline, of the number of cycles, and yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll get a few answers maybe from our authors on this question, because I think that's something that a lot of people are thinking about. I see Eleni has her hand raised. Maybe she can help out, and Arnaud as well afterwards. Eleni.
Maybe I'll try. I think that these are the very good points raised by Anne Kristin. I think that understanding, well, there is a lot of word about cycles and how many times the material can be returned back into the system. However, when you try to return the materials back into the system, they change in properties. So in reality, we don't know how many cycles the materials can do. So when you recycle them mechanically or principle. There are different forms of circularity, though. So I will even dare and say that incineration with energy recovery could be considered a form of circularity when there is no other meaningful way of returning materials back into the system, because at least you recover some kind of value rather than disposing them or allowing them to be leaked into the environment as litter, right? So circularity needs to be understood in a way that makes sense for the different types of materials, components, and products that we have in the system. And in order to do that, we need the complex sustainability assessments that indeed take time. So in relation to time and pace, yes, the complex assessments are very demanding in terms of time and information and data that often we don't have, but at least the process of trying to understand the sustainability dimensions of returning materials, components, and products back into the system or keeping them in use gives important insights that allow us to make decisions also. So the low-hanging fruits, like Hermín's mentioned earlier in his comment, is not always the right approach, especially when you don't have a multidimensional insight into the flows and the processes that take place. And I think that this is something that needs to be a balance in the way decisions are being made, because otherwise we will potentially introduce regrettable substitutes that are going to create more problems for us to solve. And really, we need to be more mindful of what we are doing. And that's why understanding circularity, or the true meaning of circularity, as we would like to say, in an inclusive manner, it makes complete sense, because it helps us to slow down a little bit in order to be able to promote the right steps forward.
Yeah, thanks. And it's true that we're trying to take it as a kind of more Shakespearean approach rather than a kind of waiting for Godot approach, right? So even if we're talking about, you know, what is the true meaning, we're actually trying to get to something and not just waiting for it to come. Arnaud, yeah, please chip in.
Yes, I fully agree with Eleni and what has been said before, because as a business, we need to have flexibility and have a clear vision on where we should aim, meaning like what kind of packaging we want, what kind of material we need. And if we decide on the material we need, and also like the policymakers need to understand that with the specific material we have a specific production, and we have a specific distribution of the packaging after the production. So we need to understand the cycles of it. We need to understand how we can collect it, how we can recycle it, how we can reuse it. We need to look at all the options regarding one kind of material for the packaging and for the product that we need to put it in. So that's for the business, because then we have to invest, and it's always millions and millions. So we need to be very clear for the business to where we put the money in, because we have to wait for 10 years, 20 years to get back on our investment. We have to shape, you know, the industry and the value chain regarding the use of the packaging. So of course we look at cycles, and the example I can give to you is that, like, for France, we decided for our industry to conduct a specific LCA on natural mineral waters and spring waters to understand, because of course if we look at LCAs at the EU stage, at the global stage, it does not fit of what are the businesses doing in a country. So we decided to go for the LCA on the French market to understand what is the circularity if we use the glass product, like if we do the reuse glass bottle, if we do the PET reuse, if we do the PET single use, and if we have the PET single use that is implemented as I showed earlier into the circular economy of this product, what's the best option? how many cycles we can get from this kind of material and this kind of system using the material. So that's something for us as an industry and as a business that we need to have the clear vision from the policymakers and for them to understand that when we decide to give away for businesses to go with, it has some impacts on the investment and then the many years coming in. So of course, we see that now paper cardboard, for instance, does not have are not necessarily in the green zone anymore for specific packaging. We know that for our industry, natural mineral waters, the shift for French market, if we shift from the PET single use to aluminum cans or even glass free use as our LCA, we would increase the carbon footprint of our industry. So we try to solve, the innovation issues linked to specific material, to a specific system of distribution. So this is something we need, I think, all to understand. So I guess an LCA on a specific market or on a specific industry in a specific market should be taken by the industry to understand with the range of the material that is available, where we should aim. So that's about the flexibility and the vision regarding the investment to, at least for the next 10 years, make the right choice. And then we, go for a conclusion on the next 10 years afterwards.
Yeah, but that is actually the reality. I mean, there are policies being set for those 10 years. There are investments being done for those 10 years. And the question is, once you've made those decisions, they become framework conditions. And I think on these questions, there is this underlying thought, which is, are all the trade-offs towards circularity, however complex that may be, are these trade-offs to be carried out by private operators in a market situation? Or are these trade-offs to be directed by policy, by obligations, by requirements that, are actually pushing operators in a certain direction, with all the doubts that we have on whether or not that is sustainable in the end, And so these are still things to be clarified and why we're discussing this. I'd like to bring in Hassan Ruhul for probably what will be a final comment in our discussion. So over to you. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. So as I can see that it's very less time to ask a question, so I'll just give a brief introduction of myself. I work as the LCA specialist of Brembo Spa, a company in Italy, really attached to the automotive sector. So my question is, there may be there are certain materials in the market which are kind of like the composite materials, if you see, which involves a lot of resources, technology, which in turn may be environmentally more impacting in getting that material recirculated or closing the loop. And even if you develop a technology or a system to circulate these materials back into the production system, the consumer, on the other hand, is not willing to pay for the price that we incur in developing the technology. So my question here is, how would you like to comment on this aspect, where we, to make a product, to go out in the market to make a product sustainable and circular, which is obviously a demand in the market, we put our money, we put our resources into the production line, but at the same time, the customer also wants the price of that product not to be, the consumer, on the other hand, is not willing to pay that price. They want the price level to remain the same, but at the same time, they want circularity and sustainability in the product. So how would you comment on this aspect?
Are you saying that consumers have contradictory demands?
Not contradictory. They don't want to pay the price, but at the same time, they want the material to be sustainable and circular.
Yeah, without necessarily paying the premium of what that entails in terms of the investment, and so who pays the price. So can I get a final round, but it has to be very short, from our four authors on that? I think it's actually just quite a nice one to leave people with a thought, on, at the end of the day, we're talking about closing the loop, but closing the loop is actually a product sold on the market.
Is it actually worth it? Yeah. Is it actually worth it doing the whole task?
Will the consumers go for that? A very last quick round. I'll start with Ulfa. Cyprian, go for it.
Sure, I'll try to comment on the aspect of new materials that are developed by industry. for different applications. And I think this Hermes touched on this as well when from Bangkok, on the fact that, well, in packaging specifically, there's new materials coming all the time, but also in textiles, we see it today as well. And from my perspective, I'm very much against this type of approach unless we have an infrastructure and systems around that can take that material and circulate it. So to me, even our simple circularity scorecard here would eliminate quite easily these new types of materials, because they don't get pluses when we ask about, do they fit in the current context and the current markets? Is there a market for this material back to be circulated, and so on? So yes, I'm personally quite skeptical on new materials. In general, on the aspect that circular solutions will be more expensive than the single-use or linear flows that we have today. Yes, that's probably likely to be the case. So now we're talking about standard materials and standard solutions. Yes, they're likely to be probably more expensive, and this is definitely maybe the biggest challenge of circular economy, is how to make it fit into the economic system as well. That requires feasibility and accommodating consumers to still find cheap solutions and so on. I think I don't have an answer to that. That is yes, but it's something probably that we as a society have to accept it as a cost in the end, especially in high-income countries, because we need to lower our environmental and sustainability impact, or make our systems sustainable. So in the end, we have to accept, and consumers will probably, at least in high-income countries, we should easily accept that we need to pay a little bit extra in order to get what we want, in order to get that nice future as well.
Yeah, and it's also obviously easier to put a price tag on action, and much more difficult to put a price tag on inaction. I don't know, just a thought, but Ulfard maybe, and then we'll go to Lucia and then Eleni for a quick last reaction.
This is the well-known dilemma, and Eleni already spoke about the values, and the values differ between stakeholders, and not all the consumers are fully aware or willing to participate with any system. To come back to what Cyprian said, yes, new polymers are difficult to include in an existing recycling system. We call that recycling lock-in. But if you have a new, for instance, depolymerization type of recycling system, your operational costs can be relatively limited, and you can get high quality food grade materials back, but your investment barrier is substantial. So you first have to go through this investment barrier before you have a system which, with relatively limited cost, can get you food grade recycled plastics back. And that's a bit a dilemma that I'm struggling with, how to get over the mountain, how to get, I'm a Dutchman, we don't have mountains, but over the barrier of investment.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ulfard. You have rising sea levels, though, to deal with. Lucia, over to you. Final reaction.
Yeah, no, I was thinking the words of Cyprian that the innovative material probably will result very bad with our scorecard, and I don't think that this is very good, because we need innovation in the society. So I was thinking that maybe it is too complex, as we have a prospective LCA. Maybe we can create also sort of prospective circularity scorecard, so not to measure what is now, what there is now, but what can be, what could be the future. As in the prospective LCA, we do not evaluate the technology as it is now, because it is under development in the prospective LCA, but we will evaluate what will happen in the future. So maybe a similarity also for the circularity scorecard.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Lucia. And a final word then from Eleni.
Great. I think that what I would like to say is that if we want to change the current system, we have to be a little bit daring in our ways of doing things. And that brings a lot of risk that the businesses may not want to make, but it's best if we start introducing mechanisms by which we allow for as much risk as they can withstand, because otherwise we will end up in a situation where we reach a wall and what's next? I mean, we're already seeing that with climate change, and everyone is seeing the effects of that. I think that with the resources and waste and plastics, and specifically, there's still some hope in the horizon. So let's start acting now before it's too late.
Brilliant. Thank you so much to the four of you for having been upfront with the paper, sharing some of your thoughts, being open to challenge and some light criticism. Let's put it that way. I think that was really instructive. Thanks also to the the four prepared reactions actually from Monia to Stephen, Arnaud, and Davide for having also shared your thoughts and prepared that. Thanks to everyone for the open discussion. I think it was there were some great quality contributions there also in the chat. And I would just then like to finish this by saying that there's really an open invitation to maintain this dialogue. I think that was the idea behind this session that was carried out by the four universities, to build a dialogue, let's say in particular between academia, but also involving industry, involving policymakers. In the past, there have been initiatives of this nature, and there are a lot of initiatives that support R&D, technological innovation and public-private partnerships in this kind of, let's build new projects, new products, all sorts of things like that. But when it comes to methodology, it's not so easy, to get this dialogue going between these different categories across society, across product groups, across materials. And yet methodology is really important. We see it in policy making, but we also see it in business decision making, and there is a need to do that. So I would just like to finish with an open invitation, which is that we will be following up to all the registered participants with an email. If you would like to somehow be part of any follow-up discussion that we're able to build out of this, okay? Basically, you would just need to let us know. You opt in. You would also obviously receive the presentations. And we'll make that available to you, but we want to make sure that you are on board on this kind of journey, this dialogue that we see is really required, but it's also very complex. The end goal is to try and get to something simple that reflects, the value-based judgment that we're making. That is that circularity must support sustainability. If circularity is to be a given in this whole debate, and it kind of is, it's an imposed concept, it should really be aligned with what we imagine to be sustainable, whether that's through LCA or other kinds of methodologies that come in support. And so you will be receiving an email to follow up. I'll be sending that very shortly. And hopefully, this conversation will have encouraged you to get on board this journey with us. Okay, so on that note, thank you so much for having joined and take care. Bye-bye.